Alright, so welcome back to the lesson part 2 of adding the content to our cube. Now, we're going to take a look at where we last left off when we started adding all those class names. So why did I go to all that trouble to add those class names? Well, let's go ahead and take a look at this now. So basically what I want to do is say, right, if any element is clicked inside of the body, which is basically the entire document right here, if anything is clicked, what I want to do is check to see if that element has a class name of not me. If it doesn't have a class name of not me, for example this element or this element right here, then what I want to do is fade out this date picker. And it's that simple, and then obviously play that animation and close the accordion and so forth. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is go into Dreamweaver, and I'm just going to point to the body element first of all. Then I'm going to listen out for a click event, and then I'm going to run a function. Now this is very important. Right here in the function, by default, what jQuery does is pass in an event object. So this event object actually contains all the information about the element that was clicked. So for example, if it has a class name or it has such and such. So this is very, very important that we pass in this object. Now you don't have to, obviously this is optional right here. As you can see with this event right here, we didn't pass in the event object, and the same with this event and so forth. So this is optional. But however, in this case, we need to know about the object that was clicked, and that's where the event object comes in. So I'm going to pass it in through the parameter e. So think of e as a variable, and that's just going to store the object so we can point to the object and get access to the object so we can actually check it to see if it has the class name. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is then what I'm going to do is write an if statement and say if, and then I'm going to put the $sign E, so I'm pointing to the event object which holds all that information about the DOM element that was clicked, dot target. Alright, and once I've done that, then what I'm going to do is use the hasClass method, and I'm going to look for the class not me. And again, this is case sensitive, so it's very important. So I'm going to end the brackets right there and open and close my parentheses. Alright, so once I've gone ahead and done that, what I'm going to do is just use the console real quick so you can see what we're doing. So I'm going to say console.log, and I'm going to say true. And then what I'm going to do is say else console.log false. So let's go ahead and save that now and take a look at this inside the browser. Hit refresh. I'm going to open up the console right here. So you'll notice when I click on any DOM element inside of the body, which is effectively the entire document, you'll see there this element right here doesn't have the class. If I click on this element right here, this also input field right here doesn't have a class, which we're going to fix in just a second. But we want this input field to have the class not me, because obviously we don't want this to close as soon as we focus on this input. But however, you'll notice that when I start to click these buttons right here, it starts to say true. And this is because this element right here has the class not me, and therefore it's not going to close. But if it's false, what it's going to do is close the date picker. It's that simple. Now you'll notice with these right here that we're not getting true, and that's because what jQuery has done, or the jQuery UI, is basically said when you click on one of these anchors, what it's going to do is prevent the default. That's very, very important. So when it says prevent default, it means that it's not actually going to fire an event as such. So it's just going to stop it. But however, these empty TDs right here in tables and so forth, and you'll notice that number is increasing, then you get all of these truths. True, 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 and then when we select out of it, we get false. It's that simple. So let's go ahead and fix that problem where this input right here needs to have that class of not me, because we don't want this to close the date picker before we've opened it up. It's sort of doing the completely wrong thing. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is copy this line out, and just below here, what we're going to do is say wrap. So we're actually pointing to the DOM element that's wrapping up all of this, so it's wrapping the input and also the date and the div with the ID of middle dark as well, because this is going to get split up into 5 panels, don't forget. And again, we're going to need all the classes on there just in case they accidentally click on this before the animation is finished. So I'm just going to say wrap.find add class not me. That's that problem solved. Now right here, all I want to do is check to see if it hasn't got the class, and then I want to do something. I don't really want this else in here. So what I need to do is reverse this. So if this doesn't have the class not me, then I want to run and execute some commands. So all I've got to do is put in an exclamation mark. So instead of saying, okay, look for this class, if it has the class, then return true, I'm actually now saying, okay, if it hasn't got this class, and that's all to do with that exclamation mark, then return true, and then we can start to execute some commands. Nice and easy. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is delete that out, and the next thing that I want to do is to create an if statement again. And what I'm going to do is to check to make sure that date over is visible, because we don't actually want to start fading stuff out and so forth while stuff is in the middle of its animation and so forth. So for example, if we're, let's say, halfway through 300 milliseconds of the origami folding effect, we don't exactly want to start fading stuff out. And also what you'll notice is that date over fades in after the animation. So what I'm going to do is make sure that this element right here, date over, is visible before I even do anything. So I'm going to say date over dot is, and then I'm going to make sure that it is visible. And then if it is visible, then I want to start fading stuff out and again playing that animation and so forth. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is say date over dot fade out 200 milliseconds, and then I want to actually apply a callback function. So I'm just going to put in a comma right here, and we're just going to say function. So this function will execute when date over has faded out. That's very important. And then what we can do is then start to animate the date element right here. So once I've gone ahead and done that, let's go ahead and copy this line so that it makes it easier. I'm going to say fade out. And this time I'm actually going to make this longer. I'm just going to make this 600 milliseconds. So then we get that origami folding effect. And instead of saying reset, I'm going to say collapse. So it's doing the complete opposite, which is setting it back to -100. So once I've gone ahead and done that, the next thing to do is to go back into Safari. So what's going to happen is, for example, if I click on this element, we focus on it, we get the animation. Perfect. And now we can click inside of here, no problem. Let's go ahead and click through. As you can see, we're clicking through. That's nice and easy. And of course, this is still true, so we're not actually clicking on anything that hasn't got the class of not me. But however, if we start to click on elements that haven't got the class of not me, watch what happens. Basically, it's going to check to see if date over is visible, which of course it is, and then it's going to fade it out and then play that animation. Nice and easy, and that's how simple it is inside of jQuery. So the next thing that I want to do is basically whatever date we have right here that we've selected, I want this date to show up in this input field, because obviously there's no point having a date picker like so without actually filling out that input field's value. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is right here, obviously again we're going to check to make sure that date over is visible, and then let's just space this out. I want to grab the date value and I'm going to store it in a variable. So again we're going to point to date over date picker, and inside of the opening and closing brackets, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say date format, and you can read up in the jQuery UI documentation right here what formats you can actually retrieve, but what I want to do is retrieve the format dd-mm-yy. So what this is actually going to return is the day, and it's going to be followed by a 0 if it's not double digits. So for example, if it's day 5, it's going to say 05. If it says 12, then obviously it's just going to say 12. So that's what that's going to do. The same for the month. Again, it's going to be followed by a 0 digit. So if it's the 5th month, it's just going to say 05. But if it's the 12th month, it will just show like so. And then YY is 4 digits for the year, so 2013, 2014, so forth and so on. And then what we want to do is get the value. That's very important, so I'm going to say .val, and it's that simple. So now that I have the value stored inside of this variable, I want to take that value, the variable, and place that into the inputs value. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is target the input, which is date trigger, and then I'm going to say .val, and then I'm going to point to the variable gDate. So that way we're going to put the value of gDate into the value of the input. Nice and easy. So once I've gone ahead and done that, we can go ahead and save this now, and when we hit refresh, you'll be able to see that what happens is when we click on this, click on a date, and then click off, you'll notice we get the date right there as the value for that input. So that is very easy. So now what I want to do is move on and finish off the rest of the faces. So let's go ahead and go back into main CSS and take a look at the cube. So right here I want to add 90 degrees, which is going to be 180. And then what I'm going to do is go into the source code, and we just want to take a look at the back face right now, and I'm just going to uncomment that out so we can see all the DOM elements, and then go back, hit refresh, and there we go. So you'll be able to see now that we have what is a Vimeo video right here, and also we have a little text area as a description, so you can go ahead and put any content you like on these faces, whether it be video and so forth. Now the reason why I said earlier on that this is running on a local host or an emulated server is because the Vimeo video or YouTube video, for example, doesn't show up unless it's in a server based environment. So as I said, you can go ahead and get XAMPP, check that out, it's totally free, or MAMP perhaps for Mac as well. So we're on the back face right now, so what I want to go ahead and do is rotate around another 90 degrees. So I'm going to go to the cube and I'm going to change this to 270, and then let's go ahead and take a look at the left hand side. So we're going all the way around, we've gone from the front, right, back, left, and I'm just going to save that, and let's go back and hit refresh. And there we go. So basically all I've done is just provided a bit of profile information, and then we have a finish button right here, and when we click that we're going to go to the top face. So there's a little trick to the top face right here, and I'm going to show you that real quick. So what I'm going to do is uncomment this out, so we have a little tick image and a simple thank you message. So what I'm going to go ahead and do now is I'm going to leave in this rotate Y transform function. So the reason why I'm going to do that is because I want to go from the left hand side to the top. So it's very important that I leave that rotate Y in there, so we're on the left hand side, and then say, right, I want to go to the top, so we're going to say rotate, and instead of the x-axis it's actually going to be the z-axis, because don't forget the axes are local to the elements themselves. So I've already rotated this, so this has sort of distorted the axis from the global axes, and where I have rotate z right here I can say negative 90 degrees. And I'm just going to go ahead and save that and hit refresh, and we don't get anything. So this means that we actually have a little bit of a problem, which I gather I made a slight mistake in editing right here, where the top should actually be negative, because don't forget, when I relate it to Blender, the y-axis is different. So when we say negative in the browser on the y-axis, it goes more towards the top. So I'm just going to change that to a negative number right there. And the little trick right here is rotating it on the z-axis. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is cut that out, and we need to make this a positive right here. Let's go make this a positive, and I'm just going to get rid of these transform functions. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go back and hit refresh. And there we go, we have this thank you, but you'll notice it's pointing towards the front face, because if we inspect this now, when I target the cube, what I'm going to do is rotate on the y-axis. And you'll be able to see there is the front face, then you have the top, and then you have the back face. So what I need to do is actually get this top face to line up with the left hand side rather than the front face. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is point to the top and I'm just going to very quickly show you this in the browser so you can see what's happening. I'm going to say rotate on the z-axis, and if you ever get confused with your axes and whatnot and what's going off, go ahead and use these tools. They're going to be a major help to you. So I'm just going to say 0 degrees, and then I'm just going to hold down the shift key, which will move it up in increments of 10, and press the up arrow, and then you'll be able to see it's increasing, and you can also decrease it. So if I decrease it by -90, it's facing towards the right hand side, which of course we don't want because we want the left hand side. And so once we do that, we can say rotate Y on the cube -270 like it would be, and there you go. So that's working perfect. So what I need to do is make sure that I apply that in the actual CSS. So with the top, we're going to say rotate on the z-axis by 90 degrees. And so once I go ahead and paste this in to all the other CSS properties, and then I'm just going to hit refresh, and voila. So that's all working now. So we know that our content looks right, and obviously we've fixed that problem where the top was the bottom and the bottom was the top, which is kind of weird. So once we've fixed that, as you can see, this is dead easy and dead simple. So the next thing that I actually want to do is take a look at adding in some predefined classes, so then we can use that in JavaScript to manipulate and obviously create the rotational animation that we are looking for when we're going from page to page effectively in our form. So once I've done that, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to create some classes. Now these classes are going to be applied to the cube, because obviously we want to animate or rotate the entire object, not individual faces. And so what I need to do is, first of all, I need to target the cube right here, and then I need to say if the element with the ID of cube has a class of, so if I just don't put any space in there and just put a dot, this basically means it needs to have this ID and also a class of, let's say, RF, which stands for right face. And so that basically means it's top trumped, basically, and that's what CSS is all about. It's about top trumped. So if I just put in the class name right here, it wouldn't affect the rotation of the cube because an ID is more powerful than a class. So if I have a class and an ID put together, that means this will override this selector right here. So that's exactly what I'm looking for. And then of course we need to put in our transforms right here, and again you need to put in your prefix properties and non-prefix properties as well. And I'm just going to get rid of rotate Y and rotate Z. We don't want any rotation and so forth. We just want to translate it on the Z axis, and we do need to copy that with that transform function. And again, that's just making sure that this isn't getting blurred. Alright, so as you can see right here, what I have is the ability to now rotate this on the y-axis by -90 degrees. And then what I can do is put the mos prefix on there and the non-prefix version as well. And then I can create another class, and this class is basically going to rotate to the back. So instead of saying RF for right face, we're going to say BF for back face. And we're going to change this to say -180. And notice that I'm keeping this sort of in the negative. So I'm starting out by going to the right hand face, which is -90, and then we're going to the back face. Now 180 is 180. So if I was to say positive 180, it would go to the back face. If I said negative 180, it'd go to the back face. However, the problem is I'm already on the right hand side. If I click next, and this is a positive number, it's going to spin the cube around completely the other way. So we're going to be able to see the other parts of the form that we don't want to. So I've started out with negative, and I'm going to keep it negative. So negative 90, -180, and then -270. So once I've gone ahead and done that, I can copy that and create another class in which we can go to the left face, which is -270. And once I've gone ahead and done that, the final class is going to be TF for top face. We're also going to add in another class to go back to the front face. Alright, so we're going to keep that rotate Y on there because again we want to stay on the left hand side, but then we want to go to the top face. So we're going to say rotate on the Z axis -90 degrees. Once I do that, I can copy that transform function and paste that into the other transform CSS properties, and then just save that. Okay, so now I have my classes created and ready to be applied to my cube via JavaScript. So let's go ahead and go back into the source code right down here, and let's just take a look at jQuery. So the first thing I want to do is basically when I target this input field, so when we go to the front face right here, as soon as I click on this right now, what's going to happen is it's going to go over to the right hand side. Now we could have made this a link and so forth, there's lots of other ways you could do this, but I'm just going to say if I focus on this input, I then want to go to the right hand side, which is the first page of my multi-page form. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is give this an ID, because then it'll allow for faster targeting of the DOM element. So I'm just going to say ID input NXT, and then I'm going to copy that ID, target that ID, and then I'm going to add, and then I'm going to listen out for an event, which is obviously focus. So when the user focuses on that input, I want to run a function. Alright. So once I've gone ahead and done that, the next thing I want to do is I want to target the cube, obviously. So I'm going to say cube right there, and then what I'm going to do is say remove class, and I'm going to leave that method empty. So what is that actually doing? Well, it's going to remove any class that is applied to this DOM element right here, cube. And this is very, very important because you don't want conflicting classes, and you don't want to keep adding and adding and adding classes and so forth. So what it's best to do is to clear out completely all the classes that are currently applied to it. So for example, RF or TF, clear that out and then apply the class that you want to apply. So in this case, I want to add a class, and we're going to put in quotation marks the actual class name. So if we take a look at this now, you'll be able to see we have our classes right here because Dreamweaver is smart enough to pick it up, and we want to go to the RF right there. Perfect. And it is case sensitive, so make sure this is capitals right here as we've done in CSS. And there we go. So if I go ahead and save that now, we'll be able to see when I hit refresh and we focus, it's going to fire that function, which is then of course going to go to the right hand side. And then of course what I can do is copy that, because now we want to program those two buttons down here, or anchors. But we don't want the focus event, we want the click event. That's very important. And also what I want to do is I want to create IDs on these two DOM elements right here on the right hand side, which is back and next, so I can target them easily. So I'm just going to give this an ID of R back, which is going to go back to the front face, as you know. And I'm going to add an ID right here that says R next. So let's go ahead and program that up. So what I want to do is target those DOM elements, which is R back. First of all, when it's clicked, I want to run a function, and I'm going to target the cube, and I'm just going to say remove class. So it's going to remove all classes. So at the moment, if we are on the right hand face, it's going to have the class of RF. If we remove that class, it's then going to say, right, we need to go back to the default, because don't forget we have that transition CSS property on there, which is creating that animation. So if I remove the class, it's just going to go back to the front face. So let's go and give that a whirl. So I click there, go to the back, it removes that class, which means it's no longer going to rotate around on the y-axis by -90 degrees, so it's just going to animate back. Nice and simple. So once I've gone ahead and done that, the next thing that I can do is target R next, which is the right hand face's next button. When it's clicked, run a function, target the cube, remove all classes, and I want to then add a class. So I'm going to say add class, and then we need to pass in the class name, which is going to be BF. So we're going to the back face. Nice and simple. And again, don't forget, we're removing the class, which is obviously RF, and then we're continuing on animating around. So we don't have any conflicting classes. So once I click on that, we can go back. We can click on that, it'll go forward again, then next. and voila, there we go. It's all working exactly as we wanted it to. And obviously, I originally thought, using remove class, oh, well, it might start to stutter and perhaps go back and then go forward. But JavaScript just edits this so quickly, it has no time to do any sort of animation backwards. It just goes straight to the next phase. It's very, very quick and snappy and very responsive. So that's a really, really nice feature. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to target the next and back buttons on the back face. So I'm just going to say ID B back, and this one's going to be ID B next, and then we can target them. So I'm just going to paste it down below. We're going to have B back and B next. Then we're going to have cube dot, again we're going to remove any conflicting classes, and then we're going to add the class. So if we're on the back face and we want to go back, which was the previous face, which is obviously the right hand face, so we're going to add the class RF. And once I've done that, I can then take a look at this, which is B next, which is obviously going to the left hand side of the cube, so LF. So once I save that, let's go back and hit refresh. So we have this, next, back, next, and next. And there we go. Perfect. That's exactly what I wanted. Then I want to program this finish button, and this DOM element already has an ID of finish, so I can just target that. So let's go ahead and copy this and say finish. If it is click, run a function, cube, remove class, and then what we want to do is add the class TF. And don't forget, with TF, again, we've left the Y transform function in here with TF. So it has the Y, so it's still going to stay on the left-hand side. It's not going to sort of do any weird things, and if you don't leave that in, you'll notice what the problem is. And then we've also got the rotate Z on there. So we're going to stay in exactly the same side, but then move upwards. So we go to the top face. And if I just hit refresh, we go next, next, finish, and pow. We go to the top face and it says thank you. So that's basically how this all works. Now, for example, what I could do is on the left-hand side of the cube, we have that face there, but there's no back button. So let's say I want to go all the way back to the beginning again. So right here where we have go to front, what I'm going to do is add in an anchor right here. It's going to be a dummy link, and what we're going to do is add in the ID go front. So that is looking pretty good. So now what I'm going to go ahead and do is scroll down, and I'm just going to target that element, go front, on click, run a function, and then we're going to say cube remove class. So when we say remove class, like so, I'm just going to save that and go back and hit refresh. I'm just going to say next, next, and then I'm going to say go to front, and as you can see, it just rotates around and goes back to the front again. But let's say that I don't want that. Let's say I want a bit more control. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is create a class that is going to animate all the way back round again. So I'm going to get rid of the rotate Z transform function. Definitely don't want that. And then I'm going to say 0 degrees on the Y axis. And now let's actually see what happens. So I'm just going to go back, and then what I can do is very quickly just change the name right here to FF for front face, and I can say dot add class FF and just save that and go back, hit refresh. And so what it's going to do now is it's basically going to spin all the way back, which is a really cool effect. Again, it's up to you how you want to do this. Obviously this is a bit of extra code right here, but it's so simple and so easy. So we've now got all these really cool animations. It's transitioning really nicely. As you can see, it can be halfway through, the animation, but because we're using transition here, it's just perfect. There's no snapping. And this is exactly what I wanted. And the next thing that I want to do is just basically load this up inside of Firefox. So I'm just going to copy that address and we're just going to grab Firefox right here. Paste this in, and as you can see, everything is working just fine. Now, CSS 3D in Firefox is not as good as WebKit. WebKit is one of the best. However, when it comes to this actual calendar or date picker, everything still works. It still works perfectly fine. The only problem is you'll notice that when I open this up, there was some tiny scroll bars that we created. Now if I close it again, we're going to get these massive scroll bars right here, and this is definitely an effect we want to avoid. So what I want to do is go back into my main CSS, and to fix this we need to basically target the date element, and then we need to say overflow hidden. Now I only want to do this for Mozilla Firefox. You're probably going, oh well, we have to use JavaScript. Well, not necessarily. What I'm going to go ahead and do is just below there, I'm going to add in the @ symbol -moz -document, and then I'm going to put a space URL -prefix, and then open and close my brackets and open and close my parentheses right here. Now Dreamweaver doesn't understand this syntax, so you're going to get a little bit of a problem with the syntax highlighting and also the helpers in Dreamweaver, but don't worry about it. Just target the date element right here and say overflow hidden. And so once I've gone ahead and done that, we can save this now, go back into Firefox and hit refresh. And so what's going to happen is when I click on this now, you'll be able to see, I can click on this, get the date, and you'll see there's no scroll bars whatsoever. So this is absolutely perfect, and we can still see the edges right there, which is really cool. Now the reason why I've targeted Mozilla specifically is because if I was to just say date overflow hidden, it's not going to look right in WebKit based browsers, because when I open this up, yes, we get that paper folding effect, but watch the edges. Notice that the edges aren't pointed, whereas if I just target Mozilla, which is the browser that's causing this problem, you'll be able to see the edges are back now. So it just creates a greater 3D effect. And it also looks great in Firefox as well, because it sort of still shows those nice pointed edges, so it shows the real cool 3D effect. So that is effectively how we use CSS 3D, use a combination of JavaScript in order to animate this cube. So thank you for watching this lesson, and in the next lesson we're going to take a look at providing fallback support for older browsers. So thanks for watching.